Ezra Cole was 38 years old when his wife of 9 years packed a single overnight bag and told him she needed space to think. He thanked her for letting him know and held the door open as she walked through it. She drove away in the Civic he'd paid off 2 summers ago, and he watched the taillights disappear around the corner with an expression that told the neighbors nothing. She had told her sister he was emotionally unavailable, told her mother he never made her feel seen, told the man she had been talking to for 7 months that she was essentially already single. What she had not told any of them was the thing she did not yet know herself, that the quiet man she had dismissed as ordinary had spent 11 years building something she had never thought to ask about. The house they lived in was modest. His truck was 4 years old. He brought lunch to work in a black container his grandmother had passed down to him before she passed. Her name was in the deed on the house. Her name was on a joint account that had never held more than $6,000 at one time. But there was another account. There were other documents. There were 2 entities registered in 2 states, a portfolio of commercial real estate in 3 cities, and a single restaurant in Charlotte she had eaten at 11 times and never once asked who owned it. She had no idea, and the man she had run to, the one with the confident profile photo and the smooth messages, had even less. What happened at that restaurant table would cost them both everything they thought they had. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning light came through the kitchen window the way it always had, slow and amber, settling across the countertop. Ezra had retiled himself 3 summers ago. He had torn out the old laminate on a Saturday, laid the concrete board Sunday, set the stone by Tuesday. Camille had walked through once, looked at the progress, and said it looked like something you'd find in a waiting room. He had smiled and kept working. He poured his coffee and stood at the island, reading through an email he had received from a structural consultant in Colombia. He was 48 hours from submitting a load-bearing analysis on a mixed-use development in Rock Hill. The numbers were clean. The foundation design was his from the ground up, and it was sound. His grandmother, Etta May, had told him once. He was maybe 12, watching her repair a section of drywall in the upstairs bedroom of the house she owned outright. "Baby, don't build fast. Build right. Fast things fall." He had written it in the back of a spiral notebook he still kept in the top drawer of his desk. Camille came into the kitchen around 8, already dressed for work, phone held face down in her palm. She was a pharmaceutical sales representative, good at her job, polished and organized and persistent. He had always admired her for it. She kissed him on the cheek, a dry press of lips that lasted a fraction of a second shorter than it once had. She poured her own coffee into a travel mug, asked him if he had remembered to call about the gutter at the back of the house, and he told her he had already handled it. She nodded. She left. He watched the door close. He had met her at a fundraiser for a youth engineering mentorship program he volunteered with. She had been there with a colleague. He had been at a table near the back, quiet as always, nursing a glass of water and talking to a 17-year-old named Marcus, who wanted to know what it took to become a civil engineer. Camille had come over to refill a water pitcher on the table, caught the tail end of the conversation, and stayed for 20 minutes. She asked good questions. She laughed easily. She looked directly at him when he spoke, which most people did not. He called her 4 days later. She answered on the second ring. That had been 9 years ago. The thing he carried from that memory was not warmth anymore. It was something more clinical, the way an engineer looks at an old blueprint and traces where the calculation went wrong. His other phone was in his jacket pocket, the one hanging by the door. The number attached to it was known to exactly 3 people: his financial advisor, his attorney, and his business partner, Leon, who managed day-to-day operations at the restaurant on South Boulevard. It had been in his possession for 6 years. Camille had never once asked about a second phone. In 9 years of marriage, she had never asked him a question about his work that went deeper than what time he would be home. He set down his coffee and pulled up his personal email on his laptop. There was a forwarded message from his cousin Deja, sent at 11:47 the night before, with no subject line and no body text, just a screenshot. He looked at it for a long time. Then he closed the laptop carefully, the way you close something you intend to reopen. The screenshot was of a public social media profile. The account belonged to a man named Brandon Cruz, 34 years old, based in Charlotte, a personal finance consultant with a page full of motivational captions and photographs of himself in rented conference rooms. In the most recent post, he was standing in front of a whiteboard. In an older one, he was at a rooftop bar downtown. And in one from 6 weeks ago, taken at the Riverwalk in Rock Hill, he was standing next to Camille. Her head was turned slightly, as if she had heard something, but she was leaning into him with the ease of someone who had done it many times before. Ezra looked at the photograph for a long time. He did not feel the thing most people might have expected. What he felt was closer to confirmation, the settling of a suspicion that had been living at the margins of his attention for months. Too quiet to name, but too persistent to ignore. The dry kiss. The face-down phone. The weekend in March she had said was a conference in Raleigh and come home without a single lanyard or badge or printed agenda, which in 9 years of watching her prepare for professional events had never once been the case. He opened a new tab. He pulled up 3 months of their joint bank statement. He had not looked at it closely in some time. There had been no reason to. What he found was a pattern of small withdrawals he did not recognize. $40 here, $80 there. A restaurant charge from a place downtown he had never been to. A hotel charge for one night in April at a property in Ballantyne. A second hotel charge in May. A third in June. His hands did not shake. He opened a spreadsheet. He began entering dates, locations, amounts. He cross-referenced them against Camille's travel calendar, which synced to a shared family app they had set up 3 years ago when they talked about coordinating schedules better. 7 of the charges fell on days she had logged as working late or attending a dinner with clients. He photographed the screen with his personal phone. He forwarded 3 bank statement PDFs to his own business email. He took screenshots of Brandon Cruz's public profile and saved them to a folder he titled simply, Reference. His face remained perfectly calm. He went back through 6 months of the shared calendar. He made a second column in the spreadsheet. He nodded every date she had listed as unavailable against the charges he had found. The alignment was not perfect. It was better than perfect. It was deliberate. She had been careful, but she had not been careful enough because she had assumed there was no one paying close attention. The mistake people made about quiet men was that they assumed quiet meant unobservant. Engineers observed everything. They had to. A single missed variable in a load-bearing calculation did not produce a manageable flaw. It produced collapse. He checked Brandon Cruz's LinkedIn profile. The man had listed himself as founder of a financial consulting firm incorporated 2 years ago. He searched the business registration through the state portal. It had been registered. It had filed no revenue documentation. It had one listed officer. Its registered address was a mail forwarding service in Pineville. He kept going. He found a forum thread from a financial advice group in which someone had flagged a man matching Brandon Cruz's description for a personal investment scheme targeting women in the Charlotte metro area. The thread was 18 months old. It had 19 replies. 3 of the women responding had described losing money. 1 had described losing significantly more. He printed the thread. He printed the business registration. He placed everything in a manila folder in the bottom drawer of his home office desk. Then he picked up his phone and called the one person he knew would understand exactly what he needed. Patricia, he said, I need to come in. Patricia Ellison had practiced family and asset law in Charlotte for 22 years. She was 61, unhurried, and possessed of a clarity that made most opposing counsel deeply uncomfortable. She had been Ezra's attorney since the formation of his first LLC, long before Camille. She had drawn up documents Camille had never been invited to see. She sat across from him now in her office on Trade Street, reading through the folder he had brought, and her expression did not change. She has no idea, Ezra said. It was not a question. Patricia set down the last page. None. She's not on any of the business entities. She never was. Your personal holding company has been structured to ensure that for 6 years. She placed the pages in order, tapping them against the desk to align the edges. The joint account she's drawing from has $4,200 in it. She believes it's the primary account. It is the only account she knows about. Patricia looked at him for a moment. She's also, I want you to understand, potentially a victim of this man you've brought me information on. Not an innocent one, but a victim. I understand that. It doesn't change what she was trying to do. No, Ezra said, it doesn't. He drove from Patricia's office to his Uncle Raymond's house in the West End. Raymond Cole was 67, a retired electrician who had wired half the commercial buildings put up in Charlotte between 1985 and 2010. He had known Ezra since birth. He had walked him through his first structural drawing at age 9 on the back of a grocery bag. Raymond was on his porch when Ezra pulled up. He had a glass of iced tea and a newspaper folded to the crossword, which he did not appear to be making progress on. "You look like a man who already knows the answer," Raymond said. Ezra sat in the second chair. "She's been seeing someone for 7 months, maybe longer. He's not what she thinks he is." Raymond nodded slowly. He took a long drink of his tea. "Who she think you are?" Ezra was quiet for a moment. "A project manager with an old truck." Raymond smiled, just slightly. "She picked the only version of you she decided to look at." They sat in silence for a while. A car passed. A neighbor across the street waved from her driveway. "Your grandmother used to say," Raymond started, then paused, looking out at the yard. "She used to say that a man who shows you his whole hand before the deal closes is a man who doesn't know what he's holding." He looked at Ezra. "She never got to see everything you built. No. She would have been unbothered," Raymond said. "And that's exactly what I want you to be." He told Raymond about Brandon Cruz. Raymond listened without interrupting. When Ezra finished, Raymond set down his tea and said, "Then she didn't just step out on you. She stepped out with someone who was already running a game on her." "Yes. She's going to need something to hold on to when this comes down." "That's her concern, to manage," Ezra said. "Not mine." He was back at his desk by evening. Leon had sent him the reservation logs from the restaurant for the past 4 months at his request, and he cross-referenced them against 2 specific dates he had identified from the bank statements. On one of those dates, a reservation had been placed under the name B. Cruz for 2 guests at 7 in the evening. On the second date, the same. He had been eating at the bar that second evening, wrapping up a call with his structural consultant. He had not noticed them. He made a note. He sent a single text to Leon. "Reserve the center table for Saturday." Confirmed for 2-3 days past. He came home each evening at the time he always did. He set his bag by the door. He asked about her day. She asked about his. He made dinner twice that week, a rice dish, and then a piece of salmon he prepared with a spice mix his grandmother had kept in a repurposed glass jar. Camille ate it and said it was good. He thanked her. He washed the dishes. He went to bed. She had no idea. Patricia called him on Thursday morning with a final document review. The asset summary she had prepared, a full accounting of Ezra's holdings, entities, valuations, and property interests, was clean and organized and, if presented correctly, would register on anyone's face the way a structural failure registers in slow motion. First the comprehension, then the realization, then the understanding that there was no recoverable position. "You're not doing anything illegal," Patricia said. "You're not hiding assets. They simply were never hers." "I know. She might argue otherwise." "Let her," Ezra said. "The paperwork predates the marriage by 3 years." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me in the room Saturday?" "Yes," he said, "and I want it on the record that I invited her to a dinner. Nothing more. Whatever she says after that is hers to say." Real power operated in quiet rooms. The restaurant on South Boulevard was called Edda's. He had named it for his grandmother 6 years ago, a year after she died and 8 months after he had signed the lease on the space. The interior was warm, dark wood, amber lighting, a wall of framed photographs that included one of Etta May standing in the driveway of her house with a level in her hand, laughing. Most guests assumed it was a family reference. It was. They did not know how direct. He arrived at 6:15. Leon had the center table set and a second table just to the right of the entrance, where Patricia was already seated with her briefcase and a glass of sparkling water. His cousin Deja sat beside her. His uncle Raymond, who had driven 20 minutes and put on a pressed shirt, sat at the bar facing the room. The reservation under Camille's name was for 7 o'clock. She had texted him that afternoon, something she had been doing less of, asking if the dinner was a special occasion, her voice in text slightly softer than it had been in weeks. He had replied, "Something I wanted you to see." She arrived at 6:58, alone. She had dressed carefully. She was wearing the blue dress she wore for occasions she considered important. She looked beautiful in the way she always had, which did not make what was coming any easier and did not make it any less necessary. The host led her to the center table. She sat, looked around the restaurant, and smiled when she saw him. It reached her eyes. He had not seen it reach her eyes in a long time. "I like this place," she said. "Have we been here before?" 11 times, he said. At 7:04, Brandon Cruz walked through the door. He had been invited by a forwarded message from an email address Camille did not know existed. A brief, professional note expressing interest in his consulting services, referencing a potential client with liquidity concerns. Signed with a corporate name that meant nothing to him but sounded large enough to take seriously. He was dressed in a jacket and dark pants. He had the posture of a man who expected the room to receive him well. The host led him toward the center of the room. He was looking down at his phone. He looked up. His face dropped. It was not a gradual thing. It was the specific expression of a man who has walked into something he understands immediately and cannot talk his way out of in time. His eyes moved from Ezra to Camille to Patricia at the adjacent table with the open briefcase to Raymond at the bar and back to Ezra. He stopped walking. Camille turned in her chair. She looked at Brandon, then at Ezra. Her face did something more complicated, not fear exactly, but the beginning of an understanding she could not yet organize. "Sit down, Brandon," Ezra said. He did not raise his voice. The man sat. Patricia moved from the adjacent table, placed a folder in front of Camille, and opened a second folder in front of Brandon. She did not introduce herself. She did not need to. The letterhead did that. The first document, Ezra said, is a complete accounting of my assets. I want you both to understand what you thought you were dealing with. He paused. And what you were actually dealing with. Camille turned the first page. Her eyes moved quickly, then slowed, then stopped on a number. "This restaurant," Ezra continued, "is one of 4 commercial properties I own in Charlotte. The holding company that owns them was established in 2016, 3 years before we married. My name is the only name on any of it. Always has been." Camille put the page down. "Ezra, the second document," he said, "is a forensic summary of withdrawals made from our joint account over the past 9 months. Patricia's office cross-referenced them with your travel calendar. The documentation is complete." He looked at Brandon. "The third document in your folder is a compilation of complaints filed with 2 consumer protection boards in the state of North Carolina against your consulting firm. 4 women, amounts ranging from $11,000 to $63,000. 3 are currently pursuing civil action." He folded his hands on the table. "I forwarded copies to Patricia and to a contact at the state licensing board this morning." Brandon said nothing. His jaw was tight. He was the kind of man who was excellent when he was moving and powerless when he was still. Camille was looking at Ezra with an expression he did not have a name for. She opened her mouth. From the bar, Raymond said quietly but clearly, "Baby girl, there's nothing to say." Camille closed her mouth. Ezra stood. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at the woman he had married and felt something that was not anger and was not grief, but was something specific and complete and final. "You picked the wrong man to look past," he said. "I know how to build things that last. I also know when it's time to stop building for the wrong person." He picked up his phone and his keys. He nodded to Patricia. He nodded to Raymond. He walked toward the door without looking back. The room was silent behind him. Brandon was still in his chair. Camille was still holding the page with the number on it. He stepped out into the evening air and drove home. 8 months had passed like water. The house on Lakeview Drive was different now. He had repainted the main bedroom a color close to clay, stripped the old flooring in the back room and replaced it with bamboo he had sourced himself, and built a raised garden bed along the south fence that was currently holding tomatoes that had split with their own weight and still clung to the vine. He walked out each morning with his coffee and checked them the way he checked everything he maintained, steadily, without urgency. Her name was Renee. She was a civil litigation attorney who had come into his orbit through a mutual connection at the mentorship program. She asked questions that were direct and unhurried. She did not perform for him. She had come over twice to sit on the back porch and talk about nothing in particular, and both times she had left at a reasonable hour without making it a significant moment. He appreciated that about her. He was not in a rush. Neither was she. His firm had secured a contract for a new mixed-use development in the No-Da district, the largest single project he had managed to date. The number attached to it was one he had told only Leon and his financial advisor. It was the kind of number that made some men reckless. He was not that kind of man. He heard about Camille through Deja, who heard through her mother who had run into Camille's sister at a hair appointment in late spring. Camille had left the pharmaceutical company after an internal audit found irregularities in an expense account she had submitted over 11 months. She was working in medical device sales now, a lateral move that represented a significant reduction in territory and commission. Her mother, Ezra had stopped returning her calls with the same frequency. Her closest friend from college had, by Deja's account, simply stopped. Brandon Cruz had, by last report, left Charlotte entirely. 2 of the 4 civil cases had moved forward. His consulting firm's registration had been suspended. He was believed to be in the Atlanta metro, operating under a variation of his middle name. Ezra heard all of this on a Tuesday. He thanked Deja for the update. He hung up and went back to the load analysis he had been working on before she called. He did not feel satisfaction exactly. What he felt was something quieter, the sense of a structure completing itself, each element settling into the position the engineering had always intended. Not as a surprise, as a result, he was in the garden the morning after, pressing a new set of seedlings into the soil along the eastern edge of the bed. The light was early. The air still had the cool in it. A cardinal moved through the oak at the back of the yard and was gone. He had built everything worth keeping. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.